Underground stuff just occurred to me out of nowhere. Media and the culture. What's media? Our ability to communicate. Uh, I did one a ways back and had to do with some personal history from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and whatever. And one aspect of that that I did introduce was communications. But thinking back on it, and I made a point at the time that we are, in fact, in a current period of cultural readjustment to instant communications. We got a cell phone in our face all the time, watching something, talking to someone, people walking around in parking lots on their way from shopping or going and they're on a cell phone talking to somebody else. It's like I have spare time. I will talk to one of my children. They're in the car going somewhere. It's a good time to talk to dad. Why waste this time? So, taking a step back, I'm going to look at media because it has been a major factor and it does impact our culture, our society. It has a significant role and it can be easily overlooked. It goes way, way back. Each evolution, revolution in the way of human communications has a dynamic on the overall culture. It doesn't happen overnight. It comes along gradually, but it does, and it makes shifts. I'm going to go back and let's talk about Orville Wilbur, whatever his name was, the printing press guy. Everybody gets taught about the printing press. Before that, it was monks sitting in some monastery someplace who by hand copied the pages of an older book or the Bible into a new version with illustrations, and it was beautiful work done. But the Bible, as an example, uh, wasn't mass available. In fact, for a very long time, the only information that anybody ever got was by word of mouth. Maybe a stranger came through town, and he'd been over in some other town, and he knew that there'd been a flood over by the river there, and this and that and whatever. Horses allowed for the telegraph. The telegraph came into being, and now you could communicate and send a message from here to Kansas City if you wanted to. The world it gets shrinking in time and space because of media. Books, the publication of books, they're readily available. It took a long time before books were readily available and cheap enough in price so that the everyday man could have a book and read it. And he could learn ideas and concepts that he never thought about, that the teachers in his area weren't aware of. It had an impact. The concept of sharing that sort of just regular news or ideas, the sharing of ideas beyond the village that you lived in, beyond the tribe that you were born in, beyond the city that you were born in, beyond the country you were born in. You could, it's really hard. I don't know a way to pull it out. What impact did it have that some French philosopher or English philosopher or Shakespeare, what he wrote way, way back, got into print, was shared, and its impact on everything. Not overnight, but gradually, slowly. And that's an aspect of the human evolution. Not only it took a long time for the brain to materialize. It took a long time for the sharing of concepts, ideas, beliefs. Christianity spread by word of mouth. There weren't pamphlets. You didn't get booklets about it in the 14th century or the 100 AD. There were no such. It was all gatherings and word of mouth. That's how it spread. and with Gutenberg, the Gutenberg Bible, printing press, mass production of a shared concept that could be distributed. Okay, telegraph, that first, and wires get strung, and telegraph was the medium, that's the right word, medium, during the American Civil War. It's interesting, I always thought, to me it was interesting, was that when the Civil War broke out, what is now AT&T, existed at the time, was based up north, but it had lines, they had constructed telegraph lines by 1850 to major cities anyway. And when war broke out, the federal government, the North, didn't tell AT&T drop the lines that go on into the Confederacy. AT&T did it on their own. So they disconnected the Confederacy from the telegraph system that was in place at the time. And I've seen photographs, and I'm well aware that there were Confederate telegraphers, whatever, who worked the telegraph. And I'm also aware that there was a big telegraph office in Washington, D.C. at the White House. And Lincoln spent a lot of time down there reading and sending telegraph to his generals. The status of battles, the positioning of troops. He picked up real quick on the timing and immediacy that the telegraph gave you, as opposed to Pony Express. Remember the Pony Express? That was out west, and where you could put a letter and send it from St. Louis to California, and it had to be taken there on a rider, one horse rider, and then another horse rider, and another horse rider. And that's how it got there. Before, the telegraph might have done other areas, but not strung all the way across the west. Not 1,000, 1,500 miles, not yet anyway. It did come along, but anyway, we got the telegraph, and it impacted things. I don't know how many average Joes ever sent telegraphs, or were there a telegraph office in every little town? No, probably not. But business would have used it, and the sharing or immediacy. In late 1800s, early 1900s, we have the invention of radio communications. And here the world shrinks again. You're now able to send a radio message in Morse code at the time, but you're able to send it thousands of miles. You can send it from here to Europe. You can send it from Washington, D.C. to New York City. And it took a while, but radios, you see old movies and the British and aristocracy and the early 1900s, 1910, 2030 in there. They start getting these giant radio sets, and they can hear the King's speech, his broadcasts. They can listen to other people, listen to music. All of a sudden, the world is smaller again. There's music coming from Cincinnati or Houston, Texas, or whatever. And when I grew up, there was AM radio. In the 1950s, AM radio, even the little city that I lived in had their own local AM radio station. It had gotten to that point. That was after World War II. And the local radio station, we had a newspaper, and had a newspaper for a long time. Printing again, newspapers came along, pamphlets, and they, whatever, probably back in the 1700s, the American Revolutionary War, there were pamphlets printed. We had printing presses in the United States. Information could be distributed from one colony to another via that sort of mechanism. and so people could know what's going on up north or what battle happened over here. It was probably very slow. I mean, the battle might have been over for a month before anybody learned about it down there, but it was not possible. You didn't have to wait for that stranger to come walking through your village that told you that he'd been at Concord and he'd saw the battle and he could give you an eyewitness account of it. Or maybe he had met somebody who had told him about it and he could tell you, and then you could tell somebody else, and the whole chain of misinformation began, just moving from one person to the next, retelling the same story with perhaps some exaggerations or memory slips. It's so easy to slip memory slips. Anyway, communications between humans and other medias other than the mouth hole. That's what I'm highlighting out, and its impact, because it begins to include more and more people can share what's going on, from the news aspect as well as ideas. Okay. Civil War, newspapers on the north, anti-slave. In the South, I'm sure the Richmond Times-Dispatch and the paper in D.C., they all covered the war and they would report on the war. And interesting, toward the end of the war, there was Lee's army in Northern Virginia. He had convinced the Confederate officials in Richmond and wherever else. They wanted him to go to Vicksburg and defend Vicksburg, because the Confederacy was going to lose control of the Mississippi River. And he said that another thought is, if we could go up north and capture one of the northern cities like Philadelphia, then there are already, we're talking about thousands, hundred thousands of deaths at this point, that something like that, where it would be like the Tet Offensive that occurred in Vietnam, such a shock. The Confederate the war had always been fought mainly in Virginia and Maryland in Confederate territory. There were battles. Antietam was the bloodiest battle, I think, up till Gettysburg, or may have been even the bloodiest battle of the war. That was fought in Maryland, and that was an excursion into Maryland that Lee had taken, but the loss was so horrible he had to retreat. So there were not a lot of battles fought in northern territory, and the North felt relatively immune. It's not down there, but so what, and I'm going to my mill every day, but I can read about it in the newspaper. The idea was that Lee could go capture Philadelphia, and the newspaper would pick up it, and there would be such a shock and there's such an outcry because my boys are going off to war way down there. I don't even know what it's about. I mean, they say it's slavery. Well, that's what the government says, and that's what they're fighting over, and blah, 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 blah. And it's always a question, what the hell are we fighting for? Because that it would be such an outcry that perhaps there would be political pressure put on Lincoln to sue for peace. We may just do a stalemate. Okay, you guys can keep what you got. We got keep what we got. We'll work out something, but we'll have a stop the conflict and start a negotiation period, a ceasefire. That if Lee had managed to make it past Gettysburg and actually capture Philadelphia, then perhaps the news would have caused an uproar in the North to maybe pressure Lincoln to do something other than just keep throwing my boys at them Confederates. That, and incidences like war really make a lot of news, and okay. So anyway, I'm jumping around, but you see the general trends I'm trying to tell you, and the radios come in, and they start. You have instant sort of radio personalities that can speak, and politicians are always keen on using the most advanced whatever, large audience. I don't even need to print anything. I stick it in time and a microphone, and I'm broadcasting, and I could have thousands of listeners. That comes along, and again, I don't know when the AM radio station got established in the small town I was in, Virginia, but we had one. So did a lot of other towns of any size. You know, if you were 10, 12,000 people, you probably had an AM radio station right there. And they would, you could call up on Friday night and wish one of your girlfriends, I'd like to have play this song for them. The communications, okay, you keep going. World War II, a lot of communications in World War II. I mean, they had walkie-talkies on the battlefield. The commanders needed to know what was going on. You come after World War II, and television had been invented, and in, I don't know, mid-late 40s, somewhere in there. And by the early 50s, they were becoming commercially available. And although, a lot of people like, but one of the neighbors got one, and it's amazing. I can watch a baseball game. I can actually watch it. And television comes into play, and that, in the 50s, I don't know, one out of 15 or 20 people had a television, but it changed. Television stations started to appear. Some larger towns out in the outlands got their own television station, and there would be merchants there willing to pay this radio station to advertise and support a program of some kind. The agricultural news, the news, social news, the weather, you could spread that stuff by the radio. The world shrank again, or it expanded, however you want to look at it. Your knowledge of what was going on around you could expand via medium, by books, by newspapers, and by radio. And now comes along television, and it is even more dynamic because you can see people. They're live, real time, they're doing stuff. Baseball games are being televised. In the 60s somewhere, I think the debates start with presidential debate. You actually see your president. Up till that time, it would be a film strip in a movie theater, perhaps. Movies had come along in the 20s and 30s. That was even before that, and there you go. You see entirely different looking people doing entirely different stuff, having entirely different lives, and you don't know anything about it. You live in a small town, or you live in a big city, and you see farmers and cotton growers, and you become aware. The medium allows awareness of diversity of other human behaviors and lifestyles. Okay, television comes along, and it has an impact. Presidential debates, that started then, and everybody says that Nixon lost the presidency when he debated John F. Kennedy. He was sweating. He appeared bad. He was sweating heavily, and Kennedy was cool and collected and spoke well, and Nixon lost because of his debate demeanor or behavior. Same way in the Vietnam War, we had daily news. We had broadcasts. Evening news was full of Vietnam War and body count, and we had people standing up, generals standing up, and we had correspondents in Vietnam, and they were showing you the battlefield and troop enlargements. And it resulted, half of the war correspondents were against the war, the other half were, we got this, we're at the end of the tunnel, we're going to do this. That allowed people to see different positions and side with one position or another, and they believed that. Same way with Martin Luther King. The whole segregation racism thing, that really became because you became aware of it. There was no segregation or racism where you lived. There wasn't even black people. But via radio and television and newspapers, beginning to be aware of it. And Martin Luther King came during a time where he could be televised. You could see him. You could see the marches. You could see the protests. You could see the arrests. You could see the abuse. You could see the governor stand up saying, not in my school. No black kids coming to this white school. You could see that. I mean, it wasn't hearsay 14 times from somebody who just passed through. It has an impact. You Political parties obviously jump on that bandwagon, as well as advertisers, product brands, everything gets affected by that. Television, we started off with black and white TV, and I don't know, it was in the late 50s, early 60s. Color television came into being, and if you were going to buy a TV, you went straight to color TV. You didn't do black and white anymore. And color added another dimension to the whole media. And now you could watch parades, the 4th of July parade. You could watch Macy's Christmas parade. You could see how people lived, where they lived, what they were doing, what kind of cars they have. What kind of clothes were they wearing, a style. I want to be like, Ginger Rogers, and film stars, and expansion of beyond your local 10-mile radius of where you were born, grew up, lived, the people you knew. You now know, and you can start remembering names. Babe Ruth, baseball player, 1920s. People knew him. There were photographs in newspapers at the time, and then later radio, and then eventually, actually, I don't know if he was ever televised. Maybe, probably motion pictures, and that's another medium that came in. Thomas Edison and the phonograph, music could be stored on this media, and then later on, film. Photography had started in the late 1800s, and cameras, and that. Now you can see a picture comes out of. You got pictures and film strips of World War One and the trench warfare, and you weren't there, but you can see it and what it was like. You get a feel, you get a knowledge of it. The medium, photographs, telegraph, radio, newspapers, it all is expanding awareness and allowing people to see beyond, hear beyond, and feel beyond their current existence. Okay. We keep going. We got television, and telephones came into being. Telephones were slow because you had to string wire, same way with electricity. It took a while for America to be totally electrified, as well as getting telephones everywhere. It took a while. But then you had the ability, you didn't have to get on your horse or get in your car and drive over to Bill and talk to him about something. You could just pick up, hey, Bill, hey, Bill, did you hear the latest news about Audrey? You could share, you could gossip, you could, again, a tying together and expansion of awareness and the sharing of ideas, all sorts of things that were way, 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 way beyond the Neanderthal, the Homo sapien, and 1400 in Europe, the year 1400 in a French village in Europe, or even in 1910 or 20 in England and London, or in Tokyo in 1945, just way beyond all that. Television becomes in and has a significant impact. Some news reporters take on unbelievable status. Walter Cronkite was a news reporter he was believable, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, conscientious. He had a special place in our culture. And when he covered something, he was not biased one way or the other. He did not have a political view to things. He only reported what was there or not there. Okay. When he went visited Vietnam and he came back, his nightly broadcast literally shooks. It shooks the U.S. because he said, it's not a rosy picture like they've been telling us. The government's been and it shook the foundations. And that was one of the reasons President Johnson, did not try to run for a second term, because of what Walter Cronkite on television for millions of people, and ones who didn't see it that night heard about it. It was replayed. That was the other factor. Something you start coming in besides film. Now you have the invention of magnetic medias. You have cassette recorders. You don't have to have a phonograph anymore. You have magnetic tape. The technology is advancing, getting down consumer electronics. And all this, like music, the Beatles, we now have, we get invaded by the English sound. That's what it was referred to, the invasion of English. And it was music from Europe. United States, where I lived in the South, country music was the dominant. That was the music you heard on AM radio stations. Or in other areas it was big band, or in other areas it was something else. You could always tune on the AM radio station and hear a religious station or a gospel station, and you preaching, ministers, and that was part of the culture. Okay, now we come along and we've got television going, and that becomes a very powerful medium by which information is sent out, and it's much more impactful than reading about it, because you can really be there, standing on that battlefield, you're in that aircraft, you're whatever. It just has a much more dynamic bang to it than other forms of information sharing. Okay. Now you got the telephone going on, and telephone is a great thing. I mean, it helps everything. Businesses can communicate, pick up a phone and talk to this guy and get that order placed, and it just speeds everything up. It clarifies, speeds it up. It helps that efficiency that is needed in forms of productivity, so that you raise your gross domestic product. It squeezes efficiency out of inefficiency. It probably cuts some jobs. You didn't need Pony Express riders anymore. Telephone, computers, internet, massive impact. If up till that time all these media have been dominated by a news reporter or a newspaper editor, or some celebrity, or on television, major late night talk show hosts, the news guys, programming people who put on comedies of a certain kind, or put on this of a certain kind, and there are biases in how they do that and what they present. There was All in the Family, I think was the name of the show, that you could not even produce today, because it made fun of literally everybody and everything. And at that time, I guess we had thicker skins, and it's like, okay, but anyway, that had its influences. You were aware of it. I never heard that term before. Yeah, this or that was their nickname for those people, for that kind of ethnicity or group. Computers come along, again, it's like telephone, only 20 times better, because now you're pushing data around, not just voice, which is good, but not as efficient. I mean, in the time I've taken to say all this stuff, I could have sent you 500 gigabytes of data or some such thing, which covered, maybe even able to send you all of Wikipedia, in the time that I've taken to just impart this little bit of information. Okay, the internet comes along, and it slowly gets distributed throughout. It's a little more technically challenging than the telephone was. You pick up and you talk, you dial a number, you dial a number, but it is so, the potential is there, and people do see it, and you have the rise of social media, and you have the rise of internet businesses, and that's just a significant dynamic on every aspect of the American culture. And as I try to tie it in, I said at the time there were various economic forces and they were in play, and then cultural dynamics. And you can't really, they're all tied together. The ability to share ideas in way of paper, way of images, in the way of sound, and making people aware of things that are going on over here or over there, or there's a group over here that have formed together to say they don't like this or they want political change on that, and you like that group, and you can now establish yourself and tie yourself with that particular group and pay attention. And the internet only carries that a step farther. Whereas it would be an editor or a publisher or a reporter or a news broadcaster, now it's you. And you can get on and make your own YouTube channel, and you can spread the word as you see it. You can throw your opinions out to anybody who's looking around and say, well, what is this? I've been down the dark web a couple times. I kept hearing about it, and I said, well, I'm going to go down and look around. I didn't see much of interest down there. But exploration, one of the internet is so great. Come on, you can look up anything. You can ask a question and phrase a question that only you can come up with. You can word it a certain way, and you can look up answers, not just one answer, but lots of answers, and get an idea about how you might want to approach this, or maybe how you might want to think about a certain situation. Take abortion. That is just all the news all the time, you know. Okay, well, you can look in and read the consequences of it here, and why these people are saying no or banning it in our state, and why the federal government and this and that, and the Supreme Court. You can look, you can read, you can become educated, you can understand all the aspects, or some, or most, of the particular political, social that's going on. And you now have the power to form group. You can, you know, I'm going to establish the Ron Stultz website that only deals with the ultra-right. You know, I'm going to be way far out there. The government is totally, or I can go far over the other side and say, you know, we're such a rich country, we ought to be able to provide every person alive in the United States with an income from the federal government that gives them a subsistence without them having to do anything. You know, like the Star Trek idea, they didn't have money. Well, one planet did, but people on Star Trek, they didn't have any money. They didn't, you know, if they went over to Replicator and got food. They didn't pay for it. If they did needed clothes, they boop into the material, and, you know, they had moved past the concept, if you will, for work for money. Because you could take money and then exchange it for goods that you could not make yourself, or you just wanted, that's all. Anyway, that whole concept of establishing, I can now establish a website. I can pick a particular topic or many topics and broadcast myself out there, and people looking around and may find me and say, yeah, I agree with you. And we may start video chatting. You can do that. And we form a group, and you know, with the cell phones, it's been occurring. Hey, let's all meet down at Joe's Jewelry Store at 5 o'clock tonight, and 30 of us will go in at the same time, and we can rob everything. Because there's 30 of us, and they will all wear masks, and whatever those things, flash mobs. Flash mobs are capable. Instant, let's do this, you know. Anyway, the technology, the ability to share ideas from Gutenberg all the way up to the internet and beyond has an impact on everything, from politics to economics to the cultural development or undevelopment, or how it slides to the left or slides to the right, back and forth. I left that part out, and that is a thread that it goes from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, and is still going today. And as I keep saying, we're in a period of readjustment to this whole, now any one person can become a news broadcaster. Any one person can become a politician if they wish to champion a particular cause. They can get a following. They get subscribers. They can, you know, and the money is not necessarily involved in this. I'm not getting paid to talk. You know, that's not the concept of everything you do, you have to get paid for. Is that some future time? I heard Bernie Sanders talking about it's time to go to the 4-day work week. Everybody gets paid the same, but we go to 4-day work week. And it sounds really good, and I do understand some of the underlying principles of it, and yeah, I don't think so. It would not work out. That's the government. May come to that someday. Why work? We got machines to make everything. We don't need, you know, you just order it up and it's delivered to you. Anyway, this is way too long. I'm just talking about the sharing of ideas through various media, be it books, newspapers, radio, television, FM stations, TV stations, satellite broadcasts from around the world now. You can watch, I get news from Al Jazeera, which has reporters stationed all over the Middle East. I can watch British Broadcasting Corporation television if I wish to. I can, periodically I see TV shows that were broadcast in the old Soviet Union or some of the puppet states like Yugoslavia. I've actually watched TV series that ran on Yugoslavian television in the 1970s, early 80s. They're really bad, but they had television then and they broadcast stuff. It's there. And what an incredible time to be alive, because you can, there's just so much out there. It's just waiting for you to find it. And you can go down like a rabbit hole, take it from here to there to the next place, the next place, the next place, and ask any question and find answers to it. You're interested in Gutenberg Bible, when, where, how, what. You can explore that completely. Anyway, enough of this. I ramble on. Nobody will care, but to any society and culture, the media, and the sharing of concepts, the sharing of events, the sharing of gossip, you know, it's just human to tell stories and to share ideas and to want to share ideas and to learn that way, as opposed to just going to a class and sitting in a seat and being boo, 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 bang with knowledge, and then, oh, here's a test. What did you get out of all that banging on your head, shoved in your head? Did you remember any of it? Did you understand any of it? You can do it another way. It's an infinite school. The internet, it can be an infinite school to you. Newspapers and books are still around, still have a good place. A lot of people like books. Open up the page. It's got a feel to it. It's got a smell to it. It's different. Anyway, Uncle Ron stuff, this is the 26th of June, and it's really, really hot outside. That's why I'm unfortunately boring you with all this. But that's it for today, Uncle Ron stuff. I don't know what to call the title of this one. Impact of Media. Medium? The medium on American dynamic from until.